Hello, and welcome to the Romancing in Paris podcast. I'm your host, Heise. In this podcast, we'll be traveling around the city as I pick out my top romantic spots per arrondissement. You don't have to visit these places only as a couple. Exploring them can be the expression of your own love of Paris. Are you ready to get romancing in Paris? In this episode, we venture north, back across the Seine River and to the 8th district. Sort of the shape of a squashed triangle that spreads from the river to the Arc de Triomphe, up to Place de Clichy, then down to Place de la Concorde, a slice of the district that dissects the world-famous Champs-Élysées is actually referred to as the Golden Triangle due to its vast concentration of luxury shops, palace hotels, and gastronomic restaurants. A very elegant district, like the 7th covered in the last episode. This part of Paris was also a popular neighborhood for aristocratic mansions from the early 1700s to the late 1800s. Refined, yes, but I wouldn't say that the district as a whole is romantic. Its wide boulevards can be noisy and impersonal. Plus, the Champs-Élysées is rather touristy, to put it nicely. That said, there are several special romantic gems in the 8th. Today, we're going to visit one which is linked to the chic history of the district, and one which also has a romantic connection and ambiance. So much so that it might just take your breath away. Grab your chérie. We're going to the Muse Jacquemart-Andre. As we learned in episode 3 and 7, in the early 1700s, the aristocrats of Paris left the previously fashionable district of the Marais for two suburban areas adjacent to what was then Paris, the Faubourg Saint-Germain and the Faubourg Saint-Honoré, both west of the city on the left and right banks respectively. Over the course of the 18th century, an influx of opulent mansions filled these neighborhoods. The ones which were constructed along the 8th district's Rue du Faubourg Saint-Honoré were some of the grandest in the whole city, and after being confiscated during the French Revolution, they became the residences of the French president, called the Élysée Palace, and high-level embassies, including the American and British ones. In the mid-1800s, Haussmann's urban project and expansion of Paris took place mostly around the Opera District and further west, a territory whose former fields and forests were swapped with large straight avenues, homogeneous Haussmann-style apartment blocks, and luxurious mansions. During this time, the area south of the Parc Monceau, another of my favorite romantic spots in the 8th, became extremely popular with the new industrialists and bankers of the era, who injected substantial sums of their wealth into building lavish residences in this new neighborhood. One of these, sitting proudly on the boulevard named after the Grand Master of this new Paris himself, Haussmann, was to be the home of Édouard-Andre and Nélie Jacquemart. Born in 1833 into a Protestant banking family and supporters of Napoleon III, when he was 18, Édouard-Andre attended the prestigious military academy of Saint-Cyr. After graduating as an officer, he integrated into an elite military corps that was responsible for guarding the emperor. At age 30, he left the military and got involved in politics, taking over his father's seat at the National Assembly. It was also around this time that Édouard began collecting art. Soon he needed not only a home worthy of his increasing social status, but also one to house his growing art collection. He entrusted the design of his new home to Henri Parent, a highly coveted architect for the Parisian elite. With the help of top craftsmen, Parent created a beautifully symmetrical residence, with the unique approach of setting it slightly back from the other buildings which line the boulevard, in effect which makes it stand out from the others. However, the entrance is actually on the other side of the building. Those arriving by carriage would take an arched lane around to where they would be met by the main doors, surrounded by columns. The exterior might be grand, but it is nothing in comparison to the extravagant interiors. The home's sumptuous rooms were decked out in gilded wood paneling, soaring mirrors, and precious marbles, an extravagance which culminates in a monumental double spiral staircase. Simply awe-inspiring. At the time, the building was likened to the Opera Garnier, which was being finished down the street at the same time. The who's who of Parisian society attended the home's inaugural ball, held in 1876. This prestigious event was beautifully captured in this extract from an article in the newspaper L'Illustration. It is impossible to find a more admirable venue. Every fashionable and elegant celebrity was present. They all sparkled, without exception. In fact, everything was there to turn Monsieur Édouard's ball into a sensational party whose magnificence marked its era. The walls of the two entrance rooms, the cloakroom, and the hall were covered with a fragrant screen of violets and camellias. The gold decoration in the double ballroom glittered and sparkled in the light of 1,000 candles. Wow! Oh la la, Édouard! Surely the proprietor of such a grand home needed to be accompanied by an equally grand dame. I have to say, Édouard was also rather dashing. Wealthy, successful, attractive, he must have been quite a good catch. He finally settled down a few years later, in 1881, when he married the renowned portraitist, Nélie Jacquemart. Perhaps it was a case of growing love, an extended courtship, or that of the second chance life's revolving doors can offer. But Édouard and Nélie had actually met 9 years earlier when he commissioned the popular artist to do his portrait.
We'll be right back with Romancing in Paris after a word from our sponsors. And now back to Romancing in Paris.
Born in 1841 into a modest Catholic royalist family, as a young woman, Nélie showed artistic skill, leading her to pursue a career as an artist, something rather daunting and daring for a woman at those times. Gifted that she was, Nélie even won 3 medals at the Salon de Paris, an impressive feat indeed. Her notoriety increased, and soon she was painting the portraits of la crème of Parisian high society. This, of course, led her to painting Édouard's portrait, and then, later, to their marriage. Although they came from very different backgrounds, they shared an intense passion for art. The couple didn't have any children, and instead devoted the rest of their lives and energy to collecting. On trips to Italy and to the Far East, they beautified their home with precious old master tableaux and exotic decorative arts. So serious was their quest that they amassed a collection of Italian masters, second in France only to that of the Louvre. We'll see these precious works when we enter their mansion. Sadly, Édouard met an early demise at only 60 in 1894. Despite her sorrow and unpleasant need to defend her right to his fortune from the André family, Nélie continued collecting and even pursued this on a trip around the world in 1902. Although the catalogue of their amazing collection was brought to a close with Nellie's death in 1912, she had already decided to bequeath their home and collection to the Institut de France in order to make their art and splendid residence open to the public as a museum. Inaugurated the following year, their love of art still lives on to this day. In addition to their own impressive art collection, the House Museum hosts some of Paris's best temporary exhibits, so be sure to have a look at their agenda when you're planning your visit. Today's visitors are welcomed as those of the 19th century at the regal main entrance around the back. Once inside the building, you'll be greeted by the awe-inspiring state apartments, large rooms designed for formal receptions. A highlight of these is the aforementioned ballroom, with exceptionally tall ceilings and a musician's gallery above. Here it's easy to let your mind wander, imagining what it was like to attend a grand party at the residence. These rooms are decorated with priceless works by master artists, including Boucher, Fragonard, and Canaletto, as well as regal busts, massive tapestries, and prized antiques. To the left of the grand salons, the tapestry room takes visitors into the beginning of the more private apartments where the couple conducted business and daily life, including an office, boudoir, and smoking room, equally enveloped by precious art. The rest of their private apartments are usually visited at the end of the tour. Before venturing up the stunning staircase, be sure to duck your head into the winter garden, with a glass roof and shoots of greenery from potted plants. It's a magical space. You'll then be whisked away by the grandeur of l'escalier, the grand double staircase, at the top of which is a huge fresco painted by Tiepolo. Originally for the Contarini villa in the Veneto, it was transposed here in 1893. This provides the perfect welcome to the Italian Museum, found on the other side of the ballroom. Purchased on their various trips to Italy, the masterpieces in these star-studded rooms are divided between Florentines like Botticelli, Uccello, Bellini, and Mantegna, and then the Venetians, including Titian, Tintoretto, and Tiepolo. If there isn't an exhibit on or after you visit it, a more modest staircase takes you down to the couple's private apartments. Although these only consist of 3 main rooms, they are still elaborate, all the while having a cozy feel. Nellie's apartments were supposed to be in a different part of the house, but she wanted to be close to Édouard, so she used these instead. Across from Nellie's bedroom, there's a small alcove room, which contains a lovely self-portrait of Nélie on the left-hand side. Every morning the couple met for breakfast in the antechamber, found between their two bedrooms. On the wall are portraits of family members, as well as the one Nélie had painted of Édouard back in 1872, where their story began. This isn't where your story at the Musée Jacquemart-Andre has to end. Back on the right side of the foyer is the most charming tea room, the perfect place for a gourmet break after your visit to this oh-so-romantic house museum, founded by lovers and lovers of art. Thank you for listening to this latest edition of Romancing in Paris. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. That way you won't miss the next one. Ratings or reviews get a big j'adore from me. If you would like to discover more romantic places in the 8th District, see my website Je t'aime me neither for my guides to the top romantic spots per arrondissement of Paris. This podcast was produced by Paris Underground Radio. Check out their website if you are interested in listening to more great podcasts on Paris, including my other podcast, Paris Cachet, which explores even more lesser-known and hidden places in the city. In the meantime, happy romancing in Paris.